Welcome back, everyone. As usual, we are two dudes talking 80s. I'm John. That's my partner in crime, Lewis.
Hello.
And the sound effects you heard in the background were my dog. Kenzie decided to shake her moneymaker or something. And yeah, that's what we heard. So I guess she's joining me for the duration of this. So welcome, Kenzie. Welcome to everyone. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight for us. Um, we're going to talk about our favorite 80s dance songs. And as you can probably guess, Lewis and I are both amazing dancers. So we danced to a lot of songs in the 80s. So I came up with this concept of favorite 80s dance songs, I was just wondering how, because when we do this, we'll go ahead and just agree on something and we don't discuss it. And we kind of discuss it when we're on here.
Right?
Um, what was your basis for this? Were you saying the '80s dance songs, or songs you like to dance to the '80s, or songs that you like from the '80s that you dance to now?
God, you're making this complicated.
I know. Sorry. Oh, by the way, Lewis decided to have several drinks before recording this, so yeah, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but stand by.
Speaking of which, let me refresh my palate here.
Okay. I didn't realize
Oh,
we
yeah.
were doing this, or I would have joined you, but
It just sort of happened, man.
it sort of
I'm
happened.
going
It's
with
all
the
right.
flow. All right.
I like it.
So, yes, to answer your question, I went back into my transom and thought about songs that I enjoyed dancing to.
You
So,
went back to your what?
into my transom, my noggin, my gray matter.
Okay. We're making up words.
I think transom's actually a word for brain.
Is it really?
I think that it
In
is.
Portuguese? I don't know.
Maybe.
Okay, all right. So Lewis is going to do this whole episode in Portuguese, and our budget doesn't allow for any sort of notification of what he's actually saying. No closed captioning here or English translation. Good. So you went to your brain and said,
I said, Brain, what do you like dancing to that's from the 80s? What kind of songs really you sort of get really happy when they're playing? And as you know this, John, and maybe most people don't know about me, is I love to dance. I really, really love to dance. I'm a dork when I dance, but I enjoy doing it. So that's what I did. I sort of went back in my head and it's like, all right, when something comes on, what is it that I really, really get jazzed about? And I came up with six picks.
all right. So I kind of took it from a different direction. I went back to my 80s self and what was playing that would have gotten me or potentially got me out on the dance floor. So
Nice.
I
All
kind of I
right.
kind of went from the 80s self, things that I would hear back then that I would want to dance to. So I have some interesting, at least I think they're interesting picks. And before we start, I got to shout out my wife because as soon as she heard we're doing this, she did mention somebody better say Paul Abdul's Cold Hearted Snake. And so I've said it, and we can go from there. So hit us with your first rhythm stick.
It is okay. All right, here we go. The first one that I've got out of the gate here is Erasure, Respect. I absolutely adore that tune, and whenever that comes on, it just energizes me. I can't explain what it is about it, but it's
Adjust your
just
you adjust your mic a little bit. I'm losing you a little.
all right. Is this better?
Yeah, there we go.
All right. So my first pick out of the gate is Erasure, and I don't know what it is about that song, but it's just got amazing chemistry to it. And whenever I hear it, it just I gotta dance, man. It's just an amazing song. So that's number one for me.
So you said respect, right?
Respect.
Respect. Okay, yeah. That's a great song. I actually do remember hearing that. That and Chains of Love. I always remember hearing Chains of Love more, and I remember. I want to say I danced to it at the Sound Factory. Do you remember the Sound Factory?
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember the Sound Factory in San
Okay.
Francisco.
Yeah. So interesting little note about the Sound Factory. Oh God, I'm gonna totally draw a blank on the movie now. It totally reminded me of this movie. I want to say it was Copycat. That's it, with Sigourney Weaver and Dermot Mulroney. Did you ever see that?
I didn't.
Yeah, I want to say it came out like the late 80s, early 90s, probably early 90s, but it was about a copycat serial killer. And the thing that was interesting is he would kill people, but he'd use different methods from different serial killers. And Sigourney Weaver played this a doctor who was very familiar with serial killers. And the only reason I bring this whole thing up is I do remember some of the scenes were actually filmed at the Sound Factory in San Francisco. So
Interesting.
a little bit of trivia there, and yeah, but cool song. I remember I recently went to that '80s flashback show at the Anaheim or the Honda Center.
Yep.
Yeah, the Honda Center, and they played that between bands, and people went nuts. So it still resonates. It's still popular, and yeah, great song. Um,
Awesome.
so I'm gonna go with probably my most cliche one here that everyone would have expected. And we're talking about "Tell It to My Heart" by Taylor Dane. Came out in 1988. What did it peak at? I think it peaked at number 7. The interesting thing I found out about this song is one of the songwriters, and I'm not gonna remember their names. I wrote it down, but it's too hard to pronounce, so he doesn't get noticed. I guess he was discussing with his girlfriend, and they didn't think that song was good enough, so they even want to go ahead initially and send it into the record label.
Wow.
Yeah, so we could have missed Taylor Dane's "Tell It to My Heart," and it's strange because in the '80s, you know me, I was mostly the metalhead, and I really listened to almost exclusively the heavy metal, the heavier side of heavy metal, the thrash stuff, and everything else. That was where I was focused.
Right.
But I've said this ad nauseum. Taylor Dane, for whatever reason, has always been a favorite of mine, and I think that's probably her most danceable hit, probably her most famous track. And I still see her perform today, and I've been fortunate enough to meet her. Excuse me. Super cool lady. And yeah, so if that was playing, I remember that would play in the '80s, and I'd be dancing.
That's a really awesome pick. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of Taylor Dane's stuff. But yeah, that's a really, really great song. So good pick. I like that one.
And what's funny is I've got to put this out there because like you, I do enjoy dancing, not like I used to. I need a lot of liquid courage back then and now to actually participate on the dance floor. But I always was, fearful of it. I remember for my, high school prom, I had separated my shoulder, dislocated my shoulder, so I could only slow dance, which was good because I couldn't dance anyway. And I remember the advice. This is great life advice that my mother gave me. And she said, "Women like men that will dance with them. They don't have to be good, but they just have to be willing." And she said, "And anybody that's going to be making fun of you or judging you, watch them. They're the ones that are standing outside the dance floor being judgy and not participating and not having a good time. So who cares what they think?" And it's something that always stuck with me. And I think there's a lot of life lessons in that. So take it for what you will.
Awesome, awesome advice. Yeah, absolutely. You know me, I make an absolute ass of myself when I dance, right? But I don't care. I don't care. I really got to that point where it's like, I don't care. I'm having a good time. People can think what they want of me. I really, truly don't care. And that's just sort of liberating. But very good advice. And again, Taylor Dane, you can't go wrong with her. All right, the next one on my roster, of course, had to get the Grandmaster Prince in there. "When Doves Cry," love that song. It just absolutely moves me, and any Prince does, but that song is probably top of my roster of his.
Wow. Do you remember dancing to it in the '80s?
No, I don't remember dancing to it in the 80s. The funny thing is, John, that I truly had no interest in, or very little interest in pop in the 80s. Any dance music was just not on radar at all. I got into 80s more in the 90s when it sort of became retro, and that's when I really started to appreciate stuff. So
I remember dancing at a lot of parties and at Bobby McGee's. Um,
true,
you
true.
know, so I do remember doing that. Not well, but dancing. I want to say it was I was at one of ABI's one of the Christmas parties, and my sister's coworkers, which were all women, were like, "Is your brother going?" I worked at ABI at the time. My sister still did, and she goes, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, good. At least we have somebody to dance to." And she's like, "My brother won't dance," and I forgot where I was, but I just kind of gotten into it, and I danced all night. So all the gals there wanted to dance with me, and like I said, it wasn't about being good; it was about being willing. So there you go.
Awesome, man.
Uh,
Very, very cool.
this is one that slow it down there, lush boy.
Ooh, there's a piece
Um,
of cork in my wine glass.
I saw your post.
No bueno. All
Um,
right.
this is kind of an unusual one, but I remember loving it when this song came on. And going back to Bobby McGee's, I do have to laugh. We used to go there when you turned 21, but I wasn't 21.
Right.
You're 4 months older than I am. And we would go, and I would never bring a wallet, or I just say, "Oh, I left my wallet in the car," and 90% of the time, I just say, "Okay, go ahead, go in," and mark me as 21. They figured if you were 21, I had to be, and so I'll never forget for my 21st birthday going to Bobby McGee's. Our friend Zaida was dating the DJ and had a shout out for my birthday. And he's like, "Wait, you've been coming here the last 4 months or something like that." It was really embarrassing. So, yeah, anyway, but this would come on at Bobby McGee's. I'd go nuts and I'd always dance to it. Very unusual song for me, but it was Tone Loc's Wild Thing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that song always got me moving. Um, Obviously, it's very famous for having the sampling from Jamie's Crying.
Right.
I guess at the time, nobody really knew about sampling. So Van Halen's management said, "Give us 5 grand and you can, use it." Tone Loc's management didn't pay to use it. And Alex Van Halen is going, "Wait a sec, that drum fill sounds really familiar." So they ended up suing and got $180,000 for the sample.
Score Van Halen.
Yeah, that was big back in those days. People didn't realize. I think the band The Verve, they had that one big hit, "Bittersweet Symphony,"
Yep.
that had a sample of the Rolling Stones
Right.
on it that they didn't clear with the Rolling Stones. And I think the Rolling Stones got like 85, 90% of their publishing of that song. And, that's one of those songs where it's like that was their only real hit and they got probably nothing out of it. And before it had been released, they had just done the right thing and gotten it. Wouldn't have been an issue. Anyway, getting back to Mr. Tone Loc. This one, I guess the inspiration behind it was a line in Spike Lee's "She's Gotta Have It," which inspired the song. And the producer actually asked Young MC to write the lyrics. So Tone Loc did not write the lyrics for Wild Thing. I thought that was kind of wild. Ooh, see what I did there? Uh,
Ba-da-ba-ba-ts.
yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Um, number two on the U.S. charts, but yeah, Wild Thing. When that song in the '80s would go on, so would I.
That's a really good pick. That drum fill is absolutely infectious. Yeah, you did some good research here, man. I'm sort of winging it. I just came up with a list in the last 5 minutes. I don't have what place in the charts that they had. I just have what sort of moved me. But really good pick. I really enjoy that song as well. I'm actually thinking of others that I dance to now that it's not on my list, but that's maybe for another time.
All right.
All right, so my next one is again from Prince. Let's Go Crazy, and it's just whenever that comes on, I go nuts, and it's one of those songs that's very sort of fast paced. So my feet are really moving, and at my age, I'm always worried about having a heart attack. But I'm thinking, but what a way to go, man! I was dancing to Prince, "Let's Go Crazy," and Lewis fell like keeled over and dead. But yeah, that's my next pick.
Interesting way to want to go.
It's a memorable way, right? On your epitaph, he died dancing to Les Goes Crazy. I'm good with that.
Okay. Is that how you want your tombstone to read?
If that's how I die, that's what I wanted to say.
All right. Good song. I don't know that I'm as crazy about it as you are. Um, I don't know if it was the late '80s, early '90s. I just remember one time dancing out in the middle of everybody. I was drunk as could be, dancing to "Purple Rain" and doing the interpretive dance thing. And we were somewhere in San Francisco, and I'm just like, I went for it, the whole shimmy thing, and yeah, it was bad. Thank God, camera phones didn't exist back then because there would be a lot of stuff I'd be trying to live down now. So
That's hilarious, man. Where was I?
I don't know, somewhere else. You were probably dancing with some girl who was trying to set you up with her brother or something. I don't know. It's somewhere in San Francisco. I don't. I vaguely remember. I just remember being hammered. So,
That's awesome.
so, um, so when I told my wife we were going to do this, we were going to do favorite dance songs. So my wife, knowing me very well, says, "Oh, so it's just going to be Taylor Dane and Expose." So the next one is Expose, and it's a Point of No Return. It's hard to pick their stuff because I love all their stuff, and it's a lot of it's really danceable. But I went with this one just because I really enjoy it. It was also featured in the movie Adventureland. I guess they recorded it as a single, and then they re-recorded it in 1987 for their album with their new singer. I don't know how. I think the single was, but yeah, the guy just liked this idea of Point of No Return being at this part of the relationship. It went to number 5 on the charts, and yeah, and the only problem is now every time I hear it, I think of the scene in Adventureland, which is a Kristen Stewart and oh God, what's who he was in The Social Network.
I don't
I
know.
keep wanting to say Michael Cera, but not him. It was the other guy. It was kind of like Michael Cera, but there's a scene where these girls are, in the club. I think it was called Razzmatazz. Ryan Reynolds is also in the movie. And they're doing the whole, shimmy with the hands and everything else. It's a great scene. It's a great movie. Check it out. But I love Expose, so I had to include them. And yes, when that song came on, even in the '80s, I still would be going nuts over it.
Awesome. And that's a really, really good song. I'm not a huge fan of Expose, but that's got some really good energy to it. So that's a really good pick. My next one is one that I like whether I'm dancing or whether I'm in the car. It's just to me, it's almost an 80s anthem. There's a couple of them here that I've got that I consider 80s anthems. Um, it's Human League and Don't You Want Me? And love that song. Even in the 80s, I love that song. But yeah, if I'm dancing or if I'm in the car and it comes on, that's being cranked up for sure. So that's my my third pick, I think.
I was watching a movie and I forgot the name of it. It's like a more recent movie, very I don't think it did very well. Had Kate Upton in it and Alexandria. I forget her last. Daddario. I don't know how to pronounce it. And basically, these two women are fighting over the same guy. and they're in a car, and they're dancing along to "Don't You Want Me" in the car, and I was like, "Oh my god, yeah, seems very very familiar." And yeah, that's a great tune. I've only seen the Human League once. I don't think you've ever seen them, right?
I've never seen them. I didn't know you saw them.
I saw them. It was another '80s. This was years and years ago. At the Gibson Amphitheater, which no longer exists, sadly. That was inside of Universal Studios. And I think the headliner that night was Belinda Carlisle. I believe ABC was on the bill. God, it might have even started off with. I'm drawing a blank on who else was on that bill, but the nice thing about that place was it was inside Universal Studios, and
Hmm.
at least that, a couple times we went in there, and or we went and saw the Poison Cinderella concert, and Slaughter was on, and I didn't want to even see Slaughter, so I'm like, yeah, why don't we go see this show at the Universal Amphitheater? So we walked into the stunt show and watched that, and miss. By the time we got back to Slaughter, they were playing their two hits, and we're like, okay, well, that's cool. But yeah, it was a very cool venue. I think Nancy had seen either the American Music Awards or the MTV Music Awards there, and she
Wow.
also saw oh god, what was Comic Relief? Remember that? They
Okay.
used to do that yearly as a fundraiser with all the comedians like Robin Williams, Whoopi Goldberg, and Billy Crystal would be a part of it, and she saw one of those there. But I only saw Poison, Cinderella, Maiden, and yeah, ABC and Human League. So anyway, good call, good call. That song brings back a lot of memories and a lot of good times. I don't know if you'd call this a dance song. It's kind of like a slow, kind of groovy thing, but I loved it from the minute I heard it. Even in the '80s, this came out in 1988, and it's somebody we don't really talk a lot about, Stevie B. And the song is "I Want to Be the One." Now I know he has more danceable songs, like "Spring Love." That probably is much more danceable, but "I Want to Be the One" is what introduced me to Stevie B, and went to number 32 on the charts, so it didn't do that as well as I had thought. But love that song. Unfortunately, he's one of those guys I never saw until the last few years, and I've seen him several times on these freestyle fests. I've never enjoyed his performances. Like every time I've seen him, it's like, yeah, But that's a great song. I remember having the single on vinyl, like remember the old, 12-inch.
45s.
Not no, not the 45. It was a full sized single, but I mean, like a little EP or whatever. But I
All
had it
right.
on vinyl, and still love that song to this day.
Nice. For me, you're not gonna get a lot of love for Stevie B. I just not never got into him. It was I don't know what it is about him, but it just never clicked for me. So, but nevertheless, it's something that moved you, and awesome, very cool. Next one for me. Again,
And the
this one's
last
another.
one for you,
Is this the last one for me?
yeah,
Oh shit. All right, I'm gonna
this
go.
is
I'm
good.
gonna switch gears. I was gonna go with another anthem, but I'm gonna switch gears.
All right.
I remember dancing at Cheers and you bringing the song to my attention. It was, and I'd heard it before, right? But it wasn't something that I really sort of focused on, like, oh yeah, that's right. That's New Order, and that's Bizarre Love Triangle. I remember like you pointing it out once at Cheers, and I was in some sort of state of drunken inebriation. I think
Not
that's
unlike tonight.
not unlike tonight. But I remember thinking, yeah, this is a really cool tune. And that was like sort of like the beginning of where I started to appreciate things that weren't metal. I was started really sort of opening my mind to, a lot of this 80s stuff was really, really good. I just need to get out of this sort of mindset that metal is the only thing. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed that song. And from then on, that on point on, let me try and do it in English. That point on forward, that's definitely been one of my favorite songs to dance to.
Yeah, that's a really, really good song. I almost included that. I was like, there's no way we're gonna, do the same songs, and that one I almost included on mine. So great call.
Wow.
Um, I remember Debbie Wiley was my go-to. We'd go to the clubs on weekends, and I kind of remember how the song went, and I'd be like, "Hey Debbie, who sings this song?" And kind of, singing it to her, and she'd be, like she knew all the new wave kind of electronic music. She'd be like, "Oh, that's so and so, that's so and so," and I remember doing that with Bizarre Love Triangle, and she was the one I was like, "Oh, that's that," and then I'd okay make a mental note of it and go to Tower Records and you know find the CD and buy it and listen to it and yeah, so I did that a lot, and she was my go-to. So good for Debbie and her not being able to decipher my horrible singing and melodies and knowing what the hell song I was talking about. But I don't really remember pointing that song out to you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it was a Cheers, and I completely remember it. And again, I was pretty drunk that night, but I'm like, yeah, this is a really fucking cool tune. And then from then on forward, man, that's sort of started opening my mind to things non-metal that are 80s, and no looking back.
Was that when Ivan abandoned us?
I don't think it was the same night that Ivan abandoned us. No.
Okay, so I gotta tell this story. We have this
Yeah, yeah,
friend named Ivan. He'll never hear this, so what do I care?
with the race gloves.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. He's the only person I've ever known in my life that wore driving gloves just for commutes. It wasn't like he was, Formula One racing. He had on his driving gloves. If anyone knows anyone that ever put on driving gloves, I want to hear about it. Or if you did own it, put it in. You still wear them today? I really want to know. Put it in the comments. But yeah, we went to Cheers, which San Jose or Santa Clara,
It was Sunnyvale.
Sunnyvale. Okay, so you have to understand this was we didn't have Lyft and Uber, and we didn't have cell phones back then and all that stuff. And Ivan drove us with his driving gloves, and something upset him or whatever, and he split. And I'm like, I have Lewis and I were like, we have no idea how the hell we're getting home now. Like, I'm thinking, okay, do we get a hotel room and crash for the night, whatever? And he finally did show up, and we did get a ride home, thankfully. But it was one of those things where it's like, huh, I've never been faced with this. Like, I had no idea what the hell we could have done. Like, I didn't realize, like, how would you have called a cab back then? I don't. I guess the club probably could have, but I was never thinking about a cab. Would take cabs when I was like a tourist somewhere, not in my own cities. But yeah. So anyway,
I remember that there was a hotel like right next to Cheers, and we were like debating, do we go book a hotel room and just sort of spend the night there? What do we do?
yeah. I mean, I didn't want to have to call my parents. I think I was living with Mark at the time, and Mark was legally blind. He's definitely not picking my ass up. So yeah. All right. Better get this one done. The last one was hard. I had a few, but this one came out in 1982 and actually went to number one. And you can maybe get six of the lyrics and then you're done. I'm talking about Dexy's Midnight Runners with Come On Eileen.
Nice.
I just always remember people going crazy, and then where the after it's a come on, and when it speeds up, everyone kind of doing the maniac feet thing, like and getting right back into it. Yeah, yeah, but that was always such a great song to dance to. People would go nuts for it, and I have really great memories of that song, even back in the '80s. Like I said, that was definitely not my wheelhouse. And it wasn't like I was listening to it in '82 and dancing, but I do remember it being played at parties and things in the later '80s and stuff, and at clubs, and really enjoying it. So there were a lot of songs I could have chosen, but I felt like that's one we need. You know, we need more artists that wear coveralls, and all of them wearing coveralls. So I think it's important to bring that back. Surprised it hasn't happened yet. But anyway, Dexy's Midnight Runners.
Really good pick. I remember we would go to this Irish pub in Burlingame. I don't remember the name of it anymore, but I would get on stage, and I remember specifically once that coming up, and there was a bunch of people on stage, and I tried to do the whole Rockettes thing where we're doing "Come on, Eileen to yeah," and yeah, I actually think I got them doing it for a little bit, but then you're right, when you get to that last part, it's just like just fell apart. But yeah, I remember that song. That was a really fun song to dance to. That's a really good pick.
Well, thank you. I feel like, well, I'm not, but I feel like you could start dancing now. I'll put on some music.
I could if I had some good tunes here. Yeah, you might have
You
to cut
got
loose, but
keyboard, you got drums, you got speakers. You tell me you don't have good tunes.
oh, I can't dance and play at the same time. I can't even play at the same time as play.
Well, you can throw on some tunes and start dancing.
Oh man. Do you have any really quick mentions that you have of other ones that were runner-ups?
The only one I was thinking about, there were a lot for this last one. Like I said, definitely thinking about the same bizarre love triangle. You Spin Me Round was another one that I was debating. Because that was easy. You could just put your arms out and spin around like a record,
Like
right
a record
around.
baby, ride round, round, round.
Yeah. You?
There was one that I remember actually dancing to in the 80s. And I'm trying to think of the artist, and you'll probably remember it and know who the artist is. Buffalo Stance.
Nina Cherry.
There you go. And I remember actually in the 80s dancing to that. There was some club that we were in San Francisco, and I can't remember who we were with, but I remember that song coming on, just me really grooving to that. So that's definitely one that I remember actually dancing to in the 80s.
It's kind of interesting if you think about it, that's probably the only brother sister duo that were one hit wonders, because you had Nana Cherry with Buffalo Stance, and her brother in the '90s, Eagle Eyed Cherry, with Save Tonight, which was a
Huh.
big song on Alice music. And yeah, I used to hear that all the time in the early '90s.
Didn't know that. Didn't know they were related.
Yeah, and their father is somebody famous, and I can't remember who now, and it's gonna bug me. So thanks for that. We all good?
I think we're all good, buddy.
I think you're really good. I wish I had
I'm more
you.
than
I
good.
would have been happy to join you. And yeah, I must look. We must look like alcoholics. But I swear to God, the only day that I drink is when we do this, because then I know. And then it's like, when the show is really awful, I'll be like, I was drinking. You know.
Yeah, I didn't mean for this to end up this way. It's just, it was sort of a nice evening, and I thought, let me crack open some port, and I had a little bit more, and I had a little bit more, and here we are.
Well, glad to hear we made it. Anyway, guys, as usual, let us know what you like to dance to in the '80s, what you like from the '80s to dance to now. Whatever gets your toes a tapping. Lewis, brother, take us out.
Whatever gets your toes a tapping. That's a bumper sticker right there, baby. Peace out.
Thank you, guys.